Saigon, April 29, 1975. Less than 24 hours remain before the city falls. The sound of helicopters tears through the sky as entire families run through the streets carrying only what they can hold in their hands. But here is the detail no one notices. They are not clothes, they are not documents, they are not family photographs. They are small golden sheets, almost translucent, hidden in the seams of clothing, folded inside books, wrapped in handkerchiefs. Kim Than. Pure gold beaten until it becomes thinner than paper. And these microscopic sheets will decide who survives and who does not. At that moment, Vietnamese money was just colored paper. Banks had closed. Accounts were frozen. The entire financial system evaporated in a matter of days. But those gold sheets? They bought places on overcrowded boats. They paid guards at the border. They secured passage to neighboring countries. And most importantly, they kept their value when absolutely nothing else did. Now you might be thinking, this was in 1975, in a country devastated by war. This doesn't happen anymore. But here is the brutal truth that history has proven repeatedly. When a system collapses, it collapses in a very specific way. And gold always plays the same role. Always. Let's start by destroying the most dangerous illusion about economic collapses, the idea that your money in the bank is safe. When Germany faced hyperinflation in the 1920s, families woke up and discovered that their lifetime savings could no longer buy a loaf of bread. In Venezuela, between 2016 and 2019, the local currency lost 99.9% of its value. People who had millions of bolivars saved became beggars overnight. In Argentina, in 2001, the government simply froze all bank accounts. The corralito. You had money, you could see the balance in your account, but you couldn't withdraw it. You couldn't use it. And here is the first real conflict we need to understand. Modern money only works because there is a system functioning behind it. Banks operating. Government guaranteeing. Internet connected. Electricity on. Remove any one of these elements, and digital money turns into smoke. Paper money turns into dead weight. But gold? Gold remains gold. When Syria collapsed starting in 2011, millions of people tried to flee. The accounts from refugees who managed to cross closed borders are eerily similar. They didn't pay smugglers with bank transfers. They didn't use credit cards. They used gold. Small gold coins, melted rings, chains turned into improvised bars. Because when you are in a war zone trying to cross a border illegally in the middle of the night, the guard who controls the passage does not want to see your bank balance. He wants to see something that has real, immediate, undeniable value. The same thing happened in Ukraine in 2022. When the invasion began, the first days were total chaos. ATMs stopped working. Digital payment systems failed. And the people who managed to evacuate faster? Those who had physical assets. Gold, mainly. Because you can hide gold. You can transport concentrated value in a tiny space. And you can negotiate with it anywhere in the world. Now, here is where reality becomes even darker. Gold is not for surviving during the collapse. It is for crossing through the collapse. This distinction is fundamental. During the chaos, you need food, water, shelter. Gold will not feed you. It will not protect you from bullets. But when you need to leave, when you need to pay to cross a border, when you need to bribe an official, when you need to start over in another country, gold is the only thing that works universally. And this is exactly where the central conflict comes in. The tension between trusting the system and preparing for when the system fails. Most people live their entire lives believing that the money in their bank account is real, is safe, is guaranteed. And in normal times, that is true. The system works. But when the system breaks, and history shows that all systems eventually break, having only digital assets or paper money is like having a life insurance policy that only works when you don't need it. During the Holocaust, Jewish families who owned gold were able to buy false documents, pay for escape routes, bribe officials to let them cross borders. Those who had only bank accounts saw their assets confiscated with a simple signature of a decree. Gold could be hidden, sewn into clothes, buried, carried. A bank account? It is just a number in a system controlled by those in power. When Lebanon entered economic collapse in 2019, banks limited withdrawals to $200 per month. People who had tens of thousands of dollars in accounts could not access their own money. But those who had physical gold? They were able to sell it on the parallel market and gain access to real dollars. The formal financial system had completely failed, but the informal gold market kept functioning. If you are enjoying this explanation, subscribe to the channel, leave your like, and in the comments tell us which city or country you are watching this video from. This helps the algorithm bring this content to more people who need to understand these truths about financial preparation in times of crisis. Now let's talk about what really happens when you try to use gold during a collapse. Because there is a brutal difference between knowing that gold has value and actually being able to use that value to save your life. And that difference kills people. When Vietnamese boats began leaving Saigon, many families carried gold bars of 100 grams, 500 grams, even 1 kilogram. Gold is gold, right? Wrong. When you are on an overcrowded boat in the middle of the ocean and need to negotiate with Thai pirates who have just boarded your vessel, you cannot simply hand over a 500-gram bar and expect change. There is no change at sea. You hand over that entire bar and hope that your life is worth at least that much to them. That is how the Vietnamese discovered the value of fractional gold. Kim then worked because you could tear off a sheet and give exactly what was needed. 1 gram for a bribe. 5 grams for passage. 10 grams for food. Gold was not just a store of value, it was circulating currency. And that distinction saved more lives than any other factor. Here is something no one tells you about cryptocurrencies in collapse situations. They are completely useless. When the internet goes down, when the electricity is cut, when you are on a dirt road in the middle of the night trying to convince a soldier to let you pass, you cannot pay with Bitcoin. You cannot show your digital wallet. The soldier wants something physical now, that he can use immediately or hide in his pocket. Syrian refugees learned this between 2015 and 2016. There were people who had fortunes in Bitcoin, who could see their balances when they managed to get sporadic internet connections. But they could not convert that into a boat ticket. They could not use it to pay smugglers. Meanwhile, families who had a few 1-gram gold coins were able to negotiate directly, without intermediaries, without internet, with nothing but the metal in their hands. And cash? Dollars? Euros? They seem like a good option until you realize that paper money has 3 fatal problems. First, volume. $10,000 in $100 bills takes up far more space than the equivalent in gold. Second, verification. In zones of chaos, counterfeit bills circulate by the thousands. How do you prove your money is real in the dark, under pressure? Third, selective acceptance. When trust in the system collapses, people stop trusting paper. But they never stop trusting gold. During the Yugoslav crisis in the 1990s, the dinar lost so much value that people literally burned banknotes to keep warm because it was cheaper than buying firewood. But gold? It maintained its purchasing power. A gold coin that bought 1 month of food before the war continued to buy 1 month of food during the war. Gold was not affected by hyperinflation simply because it was not part of the official monetary system. Here a crucial concept comes in, the difference between nominal value and real value. Money has nominal value, a printed number that the government says is worth something. But in a collapse, that number becomes fiction. Gold has real value, determined by thousands of years of human history, recognized in all cultures. You do not need a government saying that gold is worth something. It is worth something because it always has been. Let's talk about something extremely practical, how you hide wealth when you need to cross borders. Bank accounts leave digital records. Transfers are tracked. But physical gold? You can sew it into clothes, hide it in everyday objects, carry it in secret compartments. For decades, refugees have developed incredibly creative techniques to transport gold without detection. Jewish families during the Holocaust sewed gold coins into the lining of coats. Vietnamese hid kim then inside empty toothpaste tubes. Syrians melted jewelry and molded the gold into shapes that looked like ordinary objects. Why? Because when you are fleeing, being discovered with large amounts of value can cost your life. Border guards confiscate. Thieves steal. Corrupt officials extort. But well-hidden gold goes unnoticed. There is also the problem of conversion. When you arrive in a new country as a refugee, you need to turn your gold into local currency. And this is where many people lose fortunes.
No, please!
Exchange houses in border zones charge absurd fees, 30%, 40%, sometimes 50% discounts. They know refugees are desperate and will accept any offer. Gold retains value, but conversion can destroy half of your wealth in a single transaction. That is why fractional gold is so important. When you have 1-gram coins, you can sell only what you need. You do not need to convert an entire 100-gram bar at once. You sell little by little, negotiating better rates, waiting for opportunities. Flexibility in a collapse is worth as much as the gold itself. And here is the fundamental tension: security versus liquidity. The more gold you hide, the safer you are from theft, but the less ability you have to use it quickly. The more accessible you keep your gold, the easier it is to trade, but the more vulnerable you are to being discovered and looted. There is no right answer. Each situation requires a different balance, and people die making the wrong choice. Now we come to the crucial moment that separates those who survive from those who do not, the exact moment when you need to decide whether you go or you stay. Because in every collapse there is a point of no return, a window of time when it is still possible to leave, and after that window the doors close. And gold only works if you still have time to use it. In 1975, there were Vietnamese who saw the signs weeks before the fall of Saigon. They sold properties, converted everything into gold, prepared escape routes. When the helicopters began evacuating the American embassy, these families were already on the boats. They survived. But there were others who waited too long, who thought the government would hold. When they finally decided to flee, the boats were already full, prices had exploded, and gold barely bought a standing place on a vessel that had a 70% chance of sinking. Here is the hardest truth about preparedness: you need to act when it still seems too early. When your friends are calling you paranoid. When your family members say you are exaggerating. Because the moment everyone agrees it is time to leave, it is already too late. Prices explode, routes close, chaos sets in. Gold still has value, but now you are competing with millions of other desperate people trying to use the same resource. In Ukraine in 2022, the first refugees who left in the days before the invasion were able to cross borders normally. They had time, they could choose routes, negotiate calmly. Weeks later, those same borders had 40-hour lines, families sleeping on frozen ground, supplies running out. The same gold that bought a smooth passage in the first week barely guaranteed a place in line in the third week. And here comes the most difficult psychological dilemma. How much are you willing to lose by acting early versus how much are you willing to risk by waiting? Because converting assets into gold has costs. You lose liquidity. You accept conversion fees. You carry the risk of being wrong and looking foolish. But waiting too long has a much greater cost: your life. Let's talk about something very few people understand: the speed of collapse. Most people imagine that systems crumble slowly, that you have months or years of warning. Wrong. Modern collapses happen in days. Argentina froze bank accounts from one weekend to the next. Lebanon limited withdrawals without prior notice. Ukraine was invaded while half the country still thought it was a bluff. You do not have time to study, research, decide. You act based on what you have already prepared, or you get stuck. That is why preparation cannot begin during the crisis. It needs to begin when everything is calm, when it seems unnecessary, when you feel ridiculous buying gold while the economy is stable. Because the time to build a lifeboat is not when the ship is sinking. It is when it is sailing smoothly and everyone is calling you crazy for building boats. Now, here is the most controversial point. Having gold is not enough. You need to know exactly what to do with it. No, please! You need to have contacts, know routes, understand informal markets. Because at the moment of collapse, you do not have time to learn. Refugees who had family or acquaintances already established were able to convert gold quickly, find housing, start rebuilding. Those who arrived without connections spent months in camps, lost fortunes to scammers, accepted any bad deal. There is an invisible network that operates during collapses. Merchants who accept gold. Reliable smugglers. Safe routes. Places to hide. People who help. This network does not appear on maps. You only discover it through communities, through trust built over years. And if you do not have access to this network, your gold loses half its value because you do not know where and how to use it effectively. Let's talk about the risks after you manage to leave. Because the story does not end when you cross the border. When you arrive in a new country as a refugee with hidden gold, you face a brutal choice: declare or not declare. If you declare, you pay heavy taxes, raise suspicion, may have part confiscated. If you do not declare and are discovered later, you can lose everything and face criminal prosecution. Vietnamese refugees in the United States learned this the hard way. Many hid their gold upon arrival, did not declare it, began selling little by little on the informal market. Years later, when they were finally established, buying houses, opening businesses, the government began to investigate. Where did this money come from? Families who could not prove the legal origin of the funds lost everything. Not to the collapse, not to pirates, but to anti-money laundering laws decades later. Here is the cruel irony: gold saves you from the collapse, but it can destroy you afterward. Because legal systems in stable countries do not distinguish between a refugee carrying legitimate savings and a criminal laundering money. To the law, undeclared gold is undeclared gold. And the penalty is the same. And here we reach the real climax. Gold exposes the fundamental difference between law and survival. Laws are made for normal times. But during collapses, following the law can kill you. Not declaring gold is illegal, but declaring it can mean confiscation. Bribing guards is a crime, but refusing can mean never crossing. Selling on the black market is illegal, but the legal market does not exist during chaos. Gold forces you to face this reality. It works precisely because it operates outside official systems. But that means using it effectively requires breaking rules, bypassing laws, accepting legal risks. And this is the part no one wants to admit. Real preparation for collapse means being willing to do things that would be unthinkable in normal times. So, after everything we have discussed, what is the real conclusion? What should you do with this information? First, let's be absolutely clear about what gold is and what it is not. Gold is not an investment to get rich. It is not a way to make money quickly. Gold is insurance against catastrophe. It is the last resort when everything else fails. And the question you need to answer honestly is, do you believe systems can fail? If your answer is no, if you genuinely believe that banks are eternally safe, that governments never freeze accounts, that currencies never collapse, then you do not need gold. Keep your investments in stocks, funds, real estate. Live your life normally. And hope you are right. But if you look at history and see the pattern, if you recognize that the impossible happens with frightening regularity, if you understand that the line between civilization and chaos is thinner than we like to admit, then you need to make a decision. And that decision is not about money. It is about responsibility. Here is the most important lesson: preparation is not paranoia. It is humility. It is recognizing that you do not know the future, that systems created by humans can be destroyed by humans, that present comfort does not guarantee future security. Every refugee who survived using gold was someone who prepared before they needed to, who acted when it seemed unnecessary, who was called an alarmist until the day they were proven right. Now, let's speak practically. If you decide to prepare, start small. You do not need kilos of gold. For most people, the equivalent of 3 to 6 months of expenses in fractional gold is a reasonable start. 1 gram, 5 gram, 10 gram coins. Things you can exchange without losing massive value in conversion. Diversify the format. Some internationally recognized coins, some small bars. The idea is to have options. Do not tell anyone. Seriously. The fewer people who know you have gold, the safer you are. During collapses, neighbors inform on neighbors, friends steal from friends. Secrecy is part of security. Learn before you need it. Research gold markets. Understand how to identify real gold. Know legitimate buyers in your city. Know how much gold is worth today. This information has no value during peace, but it is invaluable during chaos. And have a plan. It is not enough to have gold. You need to know what you would do in different scenarios. But here is something even more important. Gold is just a tool. The real preparation is mental. It is the willingness to see signs others ignore. It is the courage to act when everyone else is frozen. It is the flexibility to abandon plans when the situation changes. Thousands of people had gold during historical collapses and still died because they waited too long, trusted too much, or could not make hard decisions at the crucial moment. The real story is not about gold. It is about mindset. Refugees who survived were not necessarily the richest. They were the most adaptive. Those who could read situations quickly, make decisions without hesitation, do what was necessary without freezing. Gold gave them resources, but it was the mindset that kept them alive. And here is the hardest part: you can do everything right and still fail. You can have gold, plans, knowledge, and still be a victim of circumstances. Boats sink. Guards confiscate. Thieves steal. Preparation does not guarantee survival. It only increases your chances. And in a collapse, the difference between a 10% chance and a 50% chance is the difference between extinction and continuity. Vietnamese families who escaped Saigon with Kim then rebuilt lives in the United States, Australia, France. Many became prosperous again. Their children went to universities, opened businesses. Families who did not have gold, who trusted the system until the end, many were sent to re-education camps. Many died. And the difference between these two destinies was a few grams of yellow metal stored in advance. Here is the uncomfortable truth: civilization is fragile. We build incredibly complex and convincing systems, and then forget that they are just systems. They depend on electricity, on the internet, on trust, on political stability. Remove any fundamental element, and everything collapses shockingly fast. Gold works because it does not depend on any system. It is value that predates systems, that survives when systems die. Now the deepest moral lesson: preparation is an act of love. It is not selfishness, it is not hoarding, it is not paranoia. It is recognizing that you have responsibility for people who depend on you. If you have family, children, people who rely on you, then having a plan B is not optional. It is a moral obligation. The final truth is this: gold does not guarantee survival. But it gives you options when others have none. It gives you mobility when others are trapped. It gives you the chance to start over when others lose everything. And in a collapse, having options is the very definition of privilege. The lesson millions of refugees learned is simple: when everything collapses, what you can carry is what you have. And gold is the most concentrated, most portable, most universally recognized way to carry value through chaos. It is not perfect. It is not guaranteed. But it is the best humanity has developed over 5,000 years of history. Subscribe to the channel, leave your like, and in the comments tell us which city or country you are watching from. And remember, knowledge is useless without action. The question is not whether you learned something today. It is what you are going to do with what you learned.